we met Joanne and Jess, you guys were going to do the thinking note strategies that we talked about. So would you just remind us, what were your plans, your unit plans, or your lesson plan for that day, so we are all caught up on what we were using the strategy with?
I can go first. So it's a lesson I've done before on the wolves of Chernobyl, and the question I posed to the student was, or all the students was the Chernobyl disaster truly an environmental disaster? So the students watch the video, they gather evidence from the video, and what I did with the thinking notes was that I got 4 different articles that talked about what constitutes a healthy environment, and students were grouped in pretty much groups of 4. Each one had a separate article. They read, they highlighted the criteria in yellow, and they highlighted unknown vocabulary in pink. When they were done, the group compiled a list of 5 criteria that denoted a healthy ecosystem, and then they used those criteria to gather facts and write their final summary paper.
So let's review real quickly what thinking notes are, really. And you've done this in all your classes, just in a little bit of a different way for each subject. So for English, we do it a certain way, and you can kind of come up with your own strategy, but we are reviewing a strategy for taking effective notes on complex texts.
So I gave them the short story, we read through it one time as a class, and then I broke them into separate groups to annotate the short story. Then the follow-up lesson that I did was I connected a new vocab term for literary element, which is allegory, and I used the same strategy in the next day's lesson to teach them allegory and picture books. So they got to practice their note-taking annotation strategy as a small group, and then they moved into sort of figuring out the secret story using another literary term as a good way to refresh what we covered all year.
So before we start, did either of you let the kids pick their own sort of thinking notes or symbols for annotation, or was it sort of a classroom decision?
I put some on the projector.
You're going to underline things. If you have different color highlighters, or if you had different colored gel pens, you could use those. Some people really like to differentiate the colors. If you don't need those, that's okay. You could use parentheses for certain things. Check marks, that was on the original poster. You could have a check mark.
So I gave them some tips for things that I would do, just as a way to model. But I said if there's another way that you all like to do it, feel free to have your own hand in how you want to take notes.
I actually did it a little differently. I gave each kid the 2 highlighters, so each student had a pink and a yellow highlighter, and I was very specific that criteria was in yellow, because when they got together to discuss it, I wanted them to easily be able to go through and spot in each other's work and their own work.
Oh, and they're in each other's work. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Because the pink highlighter, you're going to highlight the vocab. The yellow highlighter, you're going to highlight the criteria. Make sense?
Yeah.
Did everybody get that? It's up on the board. Pink for vocab, yellow for criteria.
So I was very specific.
Now, do you do anything once a kid doesn't know what a vocab word means?
Absolutely, and that was actually a really good thing, because I didn't know exactly how I was going to address it, but what I found is in the discussions when they were talking about the specific vocab words, like they had the vocab words written down, that at least one person in the group knew the vocab word and could explain it to the rest of the group. And then I also let them use their smartphones to go ahead and look up, and their Chromebooks, to go ahead and look up words that they didn't know so that they would know what they meant.
Do you have words that you don't know what they mean? You have one word. Okay. Do you guys want to take out your phone or your Chromebooks? Either way, you can search up online. Find out that definition.
And what I decided to do, I used mine to Google Documents. Therefore, I had the area that the kids have concerns with, that they can all go to Google Documents, and there's a Word document out there, they can list what they wanted, and then what the key points were, they can list in the other document. And they can also add to that as well, too. So therefore, if Dave and I were working on something, and he brought up a key point that I can add to that. Oh yeah, this worked out really great, but hey, how about we did this to that? And then the weaknesses we list on the second Google document that kids can go and add on to, and we're able to keep that dynamic.
So what you're saying is I could have done this, it would have been a really good idea now in retrospect to make a Google document with a criteria, so they all added their criteria to one
And they
document.
can share it with the class, yeah?
Nice, I like that.
So, in retrospect, are there some other things that come to mind about each of your units? I mean, do you think of anything that, either that you feel like you need to troubleshoot if you choose to do this again, or that you're really happy with how it turned out, or maybe something that surprised you? I don't know.
I think next time if I did this again, and I think I will give each group member a specific role. Instead of just letting it be a free, open discussion, I might establish some clear-cut rules, and then that way I could monitor how much each person participated. When I walked around and sat in on the groups, I could get an idea of the level of participation, but the minute I walked away, I'd like to have something that I could grade or I could assess later on and use that as part of my rubric.
Most of the kids in the past have said, when I haven't used these articles for criteria, most of them agreed with me and said, yeah, no, it wasn't an environmental disaster. So by allowing them to choose the criteria, more of them made their own decisions rather than just, going along with what I thought, because really I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to the question. So I liked how they were more independent thinkers when they did the thinking notes on the criteria themselves.
It sounds like the student decision-making process really helps them buy in a lot more to the content of what you're doing in the lesson. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jess, when I was observing your class, I noticed that once you had the students start to read the text, you would wait. How long do you normally wait for something like that?
It's kind of, I just use observation and I watch the students. Obviously, I was circulating around the room, and some of the articles were a little bit longer, some of them were more wordy, some of them had more pictures than the others. So they weren't necessarily articles that they may have all finished at the same time. Also, letting the kids self-select the articles. There were 4, each of them had to do one, so they could kind of pick which one they wanted to do. And basically, I just was monitoring, and when I saw a majority of the students finished with the articles, I had them move on to the discourse, because it wasn't necessarily important that they read the entire article. They just needed to pull out some different criteria that they could use. The criteria there wasn't any hard, fast rules that they had to discover, 5 specific steps or 5 specific pieces of information. Just 5 criteria that their group thought was important. So in this one, it wasn't necessary that they actually finish the entire article, just get that criteria.
Right.
Joanne, I had a question for you, because I know I tend to be very, linear and say, okay, yellow marker, pink marker. How do you think it went letting the kids just choose how they wanted to annotate?
Some of the students did fine with it, and some have been used to doing their own thing, taking their own notes, using some of our strategies from the initiative that we have on the posters.
Mm-hmm.
And some underline, some use squiggles, some put big question marks, some highlight. I do like the idea that you use different colors, and I think next year I'll buy gel pens and different color highlighters, because the more visual learners I think would do very well with that strategy.
Yeah.
And that's something that I haven't even considered, so that I'm kind of pulling from your lesson. What I liked about it is the kids sort of made it a mini competition, and each group wanted to start labeling every literary term that they used throughout the year, and they were sort of trying to label the entire short story that I gave.
Right.
And so that worked very well. In other groups it might not. But
Right.
for the group that I had, I think the students sort
There's
of
a little
took the lead.
competition in there.
And I like that, but I do like the different colors.
Thank you.
When you break out into discourse, when you start asking questions, and it's a bit more. I noticed with your class it was started to become more student-led, where a lot of your kids had a lot to contribute. At some point, it was you're taking control again, because the kids really get into the
Right.
talking about what they found. So
Matt, did you want to go back and kind of complete that thought?
Well, they also killed off a lot of wolves and beavers, which were really essential parts of the environment, because the beavers would dam up the rivers, and that would help keep the rest of the environment healthy, because it would get more water.
I noticed with some of my classes, even when I do use some of these strategies, that you still have the students that aren't raising their hands, or the ones that are maybe scared to get say something wrong or whatever. So do you think that there's anything that could be added to this technique to help those students?
And the last job that I like to give for some of the kids that maybe have been done is put their notes on the Elmo so it projects, and then have them share out their strategy, because I wasn't as linear as
Right,
I guess.
right.
So I let them take different styles, so they put it on Elmo, projected it, and then talked us through and talked to the class about how they actually took their notes down. And some strategies work and others don't for other kids, but it gives that one kid
Right.
that maybe needed a little extra time or a little push to get up and present. And they know what they're gonna talk about because they've already had that group conversation. So it's like they were a little prepped and rehearsed, so they feel confident.
I wonder, just off the top of my head too, if giving kids a timer, so, hey, can you get in 30 seconds, make it sort of like a,
Oh, I love that.
instead
That's
of,
interesting.
and then that way, you don't have to listen to anyone drone on for a long time, but it's just,
They can, that's like, you still do student leadership.
Mhm.
I was just gonna
So
say
that would,
that.
that would be, like, with student leadership and things like that, that would
Mhm.
really lend itself.
And I have to give them jobs in a group, just like Joanne, because
Yeah.
otherwise there's always that one person that just doesn't participate
Yeah.
Right.
as much.
And what I do for that quiet kid in the group is I'll have them do the Google slide part of the presentation to review the information when we're done. So now that kid who wasn't volunteering information now has either got to grab the information by reviewing it or by talking to her friend, since he's now responsible for that presentation. And therefore, the stress of having to talk in front of the group isn't there right away, but he or she's done the Google slides for me. So
Right.
another way to get that information out of them.
did your experience doing all this make you think about new goals or different goals, something that'll be different next time in your plans?
I really thought about how much more frequently I will use the strategy. I would almost like to do it the first week of school and then keep those and then show the students how much they've progressed in terms of how they took notes. I might even do the same story, make it the first week activity where they see a story, take notes on what you know, and then show them the culminating activity of this is what we've learned this year, and
Right,
look at how
that's great.
different your notes look.
Oh, that's a great
And I
idea.
think that would be a good visual for them to see how much they've
And
improved.
then maybe, hopefully by the end, they're doing it without any instruction, they'll just be using that technique.
I kind of just realized in retrospect how much this supports my SLO, because my SLO, the IAGEs were for them to use tier 2 vocabulary, so it gets them familiar with tier 2 vocab words, and to support answers with data. So having that criteria, having that
Right.
data written out right there for them. So it's a way to kind of tie reading into the support of my
Yeah.
SLO.
To just get back to what you were asking, I mean, I think that doing these little groups is great, because I mean, without actually getting that feedback and hearing this, what you expected, what actually happened, when you might change, and, when we go back into our classrooms, we're all different, we all have different
Right.
curriculum, we all have different,
I think it's what you're pointing out is there's two different content areas, but you can use the same
Right.
information, and not even just the strategy, but some of the same information to really just create more rigor, deepen the learning. I
Even
love that.
sometimes just how you dealt with that same student,
Right.
like what worked.
right.
Well, what's nice that I get a lot of information from you is, in the leadership class, you really see the kids in a different light and you get a lot more information on the kids. So it's kind of helpful to have that.
Well, this has been great. Thanks, guys. I don't know who's available. You can come visit me. I'm going to be doing some Socratic seminars after my own annotations and thinking lessons. So 7th period, I think, on Tuesday, and 5th period on Wednesday. I can also email you out if anybody's available.
I can do period 7.
Oh, awesome. Great. I'll write it down.
I have to check those guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for the feedback.
Very helpful.